Welcome everybody to the very special edition of the Chromworks live stream today. We're actually in a live stream conversation with Jeffrey Tomek, video game developer way off in Sweden. Hi, welcome Jeffrey.
Yeah,
And
woohoo.
and Jeffrey is streaming live to my summer campers here at the Chromworks Digital Learning Studio. And so a couple of the kids have an interest in game development and are kind of pondering the thought of maybe getting into the industry, and we thought this would be a good opportunity for them to ask you some questions. This morning we had a look at a couple of your projects. We looked at Please Don't Eat Me. We looked at Mover, and we looked at how fish is made as well. And I told them all about your big interview with Markiplier and how Hideo Kojima had tweeted about your game. And so I think they're well backgrounded in some of the stuff that's been going on in you last year. What do you think about this past year? You've been there almost a year now. It's been a transformational year for you, I guess.
I would say so. Yeah, it's almost. I mean, it'll be a year in like 10 days or something. I'm not sure exactly when we left.
Yeah, so you left at the very end of August, and you were 18 years old, and that's pretty young to be leaving your family behind and going to live in Sweden, right?
And I'm the grizzled old age of 19.
Yeah, so you're a veteran now. You've been living on your own for a year, and you're doing okay out there?
I'm still alive. I'm prospering as a game designer, yes, as an agent capable of living life, and like cooking food and such. Perhaps not so much, but.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, Jeffrey's been eating in a lot of restaurants and stuff. He's not really that great at cooking for himself. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to some campers here. So if you want to talk, just raise your hand up, and when I put you on camera, introduce yourself. Just say your first name. Just say hi, I'm Cameron or whatever, and then ask your question. Okay. And if you have a follow-up question, we'll just let you keep the microphone until you're done talking to him. So who wants the first crack at him? Here we go. Let's do Jackson first.
Hey, Jackson.
Jackson, and I want to ask you a question on how is it like having Hideo Kojima tweet about your game?
It was nice. It was actually really surprising. Of course, nobody expected it to happen, but the game itself, nobody expected to do well. And then I remember I was sitting, right here in class one day, and I checked on Discord, and somebody had sent, and one of my two team members had sent me the screenshot of it, and I just I didn't believe it, not in the sense that I was like, oh no way, this is crazy. I actually just didn't think it was real. And I looked over at my other team member, the customer, and he's freaking out, and I'm like, oh my god, is it actually happening? It was crazy. It was one of those things where it's just nobody had ever expected it to happen, and then I walked to go tell some of my friends in the art room, and walked in. I was like, guys, and they were in the middle of class, and then everybody's looking at me, go and disrupt their whole thing. So there was a lot of people to explain to that day, but it was great. It was an amazing experience, though. In reality, it's probably more just whoever manages Kojima's Twitter retweeted my game. I can't imagine he personally played through the game, but who knows?
Hi, my name is Julian. How much time does it take to make a game?
Oh, that really depends. So in this school that I'm in, we do 4 big game projects over the course of the school. The first one's 2 weeks, then it's 4 weeks, then 7 weeks, back to 4 weeks again after that. So that's a general to make a very small game. I mean, games can be made in 2 days. That's what game jams often are. But 2 weeks again is still considered barely any time to make a game. How Fish is made, the game that you guys were looking at earlier, that was made in about 2 months. Yeah, I'd say 1.5 to 2 months was how Fish is made, but that was kind of part-time work. But then to the higher end of right now, the new game we're working on, Katurka, is gonna be in development for probably 8 months or something, and that is still considered a small game. I mean, some are in development for 10, 13 years. It really depends, but at the level I'm working at most half a year normally.
We've got a question over here from someone off camera on Discord. You can go ahead.
Oh, what motivated you to become a game developer?
Me. That's an interesting question. It's something that happened very slowly and very naturally. But my story getting into it really wouldn't be that different from any of you if you guys go into game development. I mean, I was like, I mean, I guess what you'd call like a nerdy kid. I played a lot of video games, a lot of Minecraft, especially. But I always wanted to get into like modding stuff, but I really never ended up being particularly invested in any of that. And then my dad got me into Scratch, which I mean you're currently learning from him right now. And then from Scratch, he helped me move up to Game Maker, and then after Game Maker, just something clicked in me, and I started spending like a ton of my time doing it in Game Maker. Then I moved up to Unity, and everything just kind of happened naturally. Like I didn't think this would be a career for a very, very long time, right? It was probably when I was like 17 that I started to think like I could just become a game developer. But for the vast majority of my time, I was sitting there just as a hobby, going home when I wasn't doing school, working on games, and being like, wow, that's pretty fun. Excited to go into business or something when I get out of school. But it just wasn't something that I really registered as possible. And then one day I was just like, why not? And then applied to a school, got in, and now I'm here. But it's still weird for me to even hear people describing me as like a game developer. Like I still consider myself just a hobbyist mostly. So yeah. But yeah, it's something that like anyone can do. It's not just like a jump you make randomly one day where you have to have been like doing this for 10 years or something.
You talked, Jeffrey, about how you decided to go to Sweden of all the places you could have gone to school.
Yes, Sweden. Sweden was kind of arbitrary. Like I mean, the school I'm going to is really great. It's called Future Games, and it's kind of like it's not a university, so we don't do any other classes. It's only game dev. It's what we do. Like all day, we're working on video games every day. There's no other like math class, physics, all that stuff. Well, as much as I wish I paid more attention to that in school, right now we don't do any of that stuff. And so but I can finally drop English. I can finally drop French. And so it's just like one of the big things that made me so excited about doing this school in Sweden was just that I could only focus on game dev, because once COVID started and I really got a chance to work on it at home, I realized that I never really wanted to do anything else. And also I just wanted to study in another country because it's cool going to another country. You get to go somewhere where none of the words make any sense and everything's written in gibberish.
Any other questions from our audience? Does anyone else have something they want to ask Jeffrey? Jackson has another. Oh, we've got one right here. So introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Gabrielle. Other than the games you have made, what games do you like to play?
Yeah, I'm a shooter guy, and also I don't play the games I've made. But once you make a game, you spend phenomenally little time playing it. Sorry, that's besides the point, though. Yeah, I mostly play shooters, tactical shooters specifically. So like Escape from Tarkov, Squad, Insurgency. Not the kind of stuff that I imagine many of you guys have, but that's like my passion. And coincidentally, I've ended up working on almost nothing like that in my time. But yeah. That'd be my best answer. Though recently I've been playing a ton of Red Dead Redemption 2. I took a week off, and it's been a lot of fun.
Was it easy learning? How long did it take you to learn how to program in Unity?
That's hard to say. I mean, the skill ceiling of programming just in general is incredibly high, right? So at what point would I say, like, how long have I been doing Unity? God, like 6-7 years now, something like that. So I have a lot of time in this. But how long did it take before I was like, I would say I had learned Unity is really hard to say. It also depends how intensive it is, right? Like when you're doing it as a hobbyist and also have school, you could spend, and also just age. Like you do learn better when you're young, but also programming turns out is quite a lot harder before you've learned a lot of like foundational mathematics and stuff. Like a lot of so yeah, it's really hard to say, but for me I would say like it probably took me like a year with Unity before I was like very comfortable with it.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question about foundational stuff. So these guys are all 11 to 13 years old. They're mostly in middle school or approaching middle school. But once they get into high school, what's the important stuff they need to concentrate on that will help them if they want to get into video game design?
Oh yeah, okay. That's a great thing to ask. Yeah, so if anybody's thinking about getting into game dev and you're looking at what's important in high school, then sorry to say this, but the number one is definitely math. Actually, it's either math or it's physics. Physics could be more important, but spoilers, physics is just math. So like if you're bad at math, then physics will be rough too. Though the one saving grace I know, I don't know how you guys feel about your math classes. I always enjoyed math, but I have never been good at it. If I went to high school, like back to high school right now, and got a math test, I would still bomb it. Like I'm confident about that. Because there's a certain type of math that's important for game dev, and being able to do like calculations really quick in your head is not that. I still don't know my times tables. I can barely add or subtract. But I know like dot products and vectors and stuff. So it's a weird like, especially if you start doing this stuff early, like you'll realize that you'll learn a lot of things that you'll get to like grade 12 and you'll be getting taught stuff where you're like, this is easy. I've been doing this for like 4 years. But then other stuff is still going to be like super difficult. So it's kind of like a weird subset that you don't really get taught in school. Oh, and also of course comsci or any kind of like computer thing. There's anything you can do with computers in your school, of course do it. So like yeah, computer science is a big one. Communications technology, if you have a class on that, and that's mostly going to be like Photoshop and stuff. But a lot of game dev is there's programming, and that's like one part. But just knowing how to do a lot of random things with computers is probably going to bring you a long way. But yeah, math, physics, computer classes, and biochemistry, those kind of science, just drop them. Physics, well, no, don't drop them. They're not relevant for game dev. But like, or at least not super relevant. Physics is a really important one, though.
What's your thought process behind most of the games you do?
Ooh, that's hard. Like thought process. Do you mean like the idea for the games?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So most of okay. So that's hard to say. Originally, like back when I was working as just a solo dev, because I'm by no means a solo dev anymore. I work with like decently large teams at this point. But back when it was just me coming up with the game ideas, it was. It wasn't like I sat down one day and I was just like, I am going to make a game. I need to think of a game idea. I found like, it turns out you can come up with game ideas much quicker than you can make them. At this point, I probably have a backlog of like 15 games that I would love to make someday. And a lot of those inspirations just came from playing other games, specifically bad games. Anytime I would play a game, I'm like, oh, this idea was super cool, but the game's really bad. And I would love to do this, but it wouldn't be bad. And that was a big part of what got me into it. Nowadays, I'm not the guy that comes up with the game ideas. I have a lot of creative input, but that's mostly like sub parts of making a game. So, for example, the current project, Katurka, as well as How Fish is Made, were our narrative lead, Johanna, who came up with the base like premise of the game, and then I would be the question would arrive at me of how do you make being a fish fun? Or how do you make it not fun in exactly the right way to keep it interesting and scary? That kind of thing. And my job's more to answer those kind of questions now, rather than just to come up with a game.
Fair enough. Any last call for questions here?
Would you like to stay as an indie game developer, or go into one of the big companies?
Another great question. So my school, the like expected kind of track to go to my school, most people are aiming for the big company jobs. If I was going to be getting a job at someone else's studio, I would be aiming at probably AA, or like indie to AA. So AA is like that middle ground between what you would consider like AAA games. So that we're referring to things like Call of Duty, good example, AAA game. Rockstar, Naughty Dog, Last of Us, Red Dead Redemption, that kind of stuff. Like the huge games, and then you have some other games, companies like Fat Shark, working on things like Vermintide, Darktide, that you would consider more like in that middle ground, where it's not quite a AAA game, not quite an indie game, and those are generally a pretty good spot to be because you still get to make all the cool stuff, but you don't. You still get some control, and you're not just like sitting there doing a desk job all day. But then personally, I intend to go into my own company route, or me and some other people are heavily considering starting our own studio. And that is going to be on an indie level, just because turns out starting a extremely large corporation with very little seed money is actually super difficult to do. So we'd of course be starting indie, but I hope someday to work up to being a AA studio. But AAA always gets a little weird. I'm not sure about that one.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And Jackson, who's full of questions, has another question.
What would you name your dev company?
Oh, this one I know. If you asked me a few weeks ago, I would have had no clue and started panicking. But no, our current plan name is Rotorhead. Rotorhead Games, I believe. That's the working title. It doesn't mean anything. It just sounds cool. That's all I have for you.
It makes me think about nerds with propellers on their heads, right? With hats with propellers on their heads. Is that kind of
Yes,
Yeah.
we're more aiming for like the kind of disturbing angle. Like I want to have the same energy that Valve has, where it's like when you launch up any Valve game, even if it's like Team Fortress 2, like something super fun and kind of happy, you still get that like weird intro where the guy's like the thing in the back of his head, and you're like, what am I looking at? And it's like kind of eerily disturbing. That's kind of the angle we're aiming at.
One of my questions is, are you planning to go into more advanced AI in one of your later games, for example, PvE elements?
Oh, I'm going into AI right now. So the game we're working on right now, Katurka, is like a third-person shooter it's single player. You go around, as is implied by the genre, you do shoot quite a few people, and those people have to have decent AI. Now, advanced AI is an interesting question, because a little open secret of the games industry is that almost all AI are so dumb. Like what you experience fighting in most games. So when we're referring, what I'm doing in many ways would be referred to as advanced AI, but I certainly don't think it's very smart. So one of the things we're working on right now is, I'd say it's hard to say. So our AIs for the game we're working on right now are hoping to get to the maximum kind of difficulty level of them, are supposed to be capable of running around trying to flank and get behind you in gunfights. They can choose between cover and generally be smart enough not to peek at you from the same cover twice. So if they go up from the cover, then they're not going to do that a second time in a row, because it would make it easier for you to shoot them. And they're also supposed to be capable of doing things like dodge rolling. So when you aim your gun at them, they'll panic and then roll away to try and escape you, and stuff like that. But how advanced that actually is questionable. But I'm thinking it'll be pretty fun.
For example, if you've played Destiny 2, then you know the AI in that game for entities is quite actually advanced, because they can do basically anything a player does.
So, what do you mean by anything a player can? I'm sorry, I actually haven't played Destiny 2, so are entities just effectively your other versions of your character that also do powers and stuff like that?
Yeah, for example, they would be able to form tactics. For example, send a bunch of the minions while a few snipers hang back.
Okay.
Which is
so
quite interesting.
That sounds interesting, but what I would just posit here is that there's a good chance, because almost all AI design in games is using a lot of smoke and mirrors. For example, these minions and these snipers, I'm assuming, are different enemy types, right? They look different, act different, right? Those, when you kill all the minions, do the snipers still hang back? And
Snipers do hang back usually and try to stay out of sight.
So
not quite out of mind.
So now, what I would say to that is pretty much that what's very likely happening in that case, right, is that, and this is one of the main tricks to making your AIs feel smart, is that your snipers are probably staying at it. They're always going to stay at a distance. That's just what they've been told to do. And your minions are always going to rush. They don't. Now, when you're a player, you're thinking these two people are working together. The minion knows that he's being covered by the sniper, and the sniper knows that you're being distracted by the minion. But realistically, neither of them have any understanding that the other one exists. It's just if they keep doing their like very simple task of sniping at you or running at you, and they both do it at the same time, it's assumed by the developer that they'll always end up acting as a team by accident more than on purpose. And no, of course, I can't speak super specifically to these enemy AIs. Certain ones are more complicated than others, but often just having a bunch of AIs that all do different simple tasks at the same time creates the illusion that they're working together in a way that makes you feel like, oh my god, they have such cool tactics. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Jack says one more question.
When is Katurka set to release and on what?
Okay, on what? Definitely computer. We would like consoles. I mean, I don't think it would run on a Switch. It would be cool to get it on like PS4, PS5, Xbox, all of them, and like all that stuff. But realistically, we're not sure if the console release just takes time. We don't know if we'll have the time to do it. But definitely PC. And when? End of December. Ideally. That's like our final deadline, and we'll just see how it goes. But yeah, there's not a whole. It's very hard to speculate on these things. Like we don't even have a store page up yet. Though we should soon. I'm actually going to be working on the trailer in a few days.
So your next game is a PvE game. Will you ever add a multiplayer function?
Yes, multiplayer. Not for this game. Multiplayer is very complicated, right? Not impossible. I've done it in the past. But when you're making a multiplayer game, and this is something that people often like Skyrim or Fallout are great examples of games where the entire community is always asking for them to add multiplayer. And right, you can add multiplayer. At least it is technically possible. But realistically, multiplayer is something you need to be planning for from the second you start making a game. That's not something you can just like retroactively put in. And to make a game that will support multiplayer means you have to sync in a very special way while you're making it, and it's going to make everything you do significantly harder if it has to be replicated over a server. And you will almost definitely regret it. Now, in our case, I've done enough multiplayer to know it's hell. And that for a project of this scope and how much time I have, there's no way we're going to be able to add multiplayer functionality. But hopefully soon, I do intend to make more multiplayer games. Probably co-op specifically.
Same question, but what I wanted to ask was on what game website, like Steam or Epic Games or...
Steam.
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe itch.io.
Is the new game gonna be disturbing, like how fish are made, or is it gonna be something entirely new?
It's in general entirely new, but Johannes Finnish, our narrative designer, and Finnish people only make disturbing games. That's just the truth. But no, it has a lot of like, you will be able to tell that the person who wrote the game wrote how fish is made, but it is like in general entirely different.
Okay, any other questions to go here? We've been going on for quite a while here, so I think we can probably call it quits anyway. So, so your advice to these guys is stay in school, study math, study physics, and what should they be doing in terms of coding? Like, should they be taking up Unity or Unreal Engine, or what would be your advice to a young coder right now?
I have a personal bias, if not a hatred, for Unreal Engine. Okay, realistically, it is a very, very good tool for making games. I hate it. I can't stand Unreal Engine. But for any of you guys, I would really recommend, if you're thinking about getting into game dev or just want to pick up like a really fun hobby, spending time in Unity or Unreal is always a great thing to do. But depending on where you're at on coding stuff, especially if you've never done it before, Unity can be quite a lot to start with. GameMaker at least used to be a really good tool, but I used GameMaker 1 and GameMaker 2 has a much more like you have to have like a subscription to it or something. It seems like it's kind of diminished quite a bit as a tool. But learning how to make games on Scratch, as much as Scratch is really different, it is actually a really good point to start coding. And I like you would the things you learn, like all those fundamental concepts are relevant no matter what you do. Like if I'm going to leave any wisdom here, especially when it comes to coding, people often, like, especially when they're bragging to people who don't know coding very well, they'll say, oh, and I know how to use C++ and JavaScript and Python and C#, and they'll like list every coding language they know. And the secret is they're so similar to each other most of the time. Like all the ones you use for game engines are virtually the same thing. No, there are differences, don't get me wrong, but on the level that you guys care about, if you learn how to code in like GML for GameMaker, you will be able to move all of that knowledge to Unity, and so on. So don't feel like you're locking yourself in the second you start something.
Okay, cool. Actually, Jackson has one more question.
How is it learning C++?
C++. That's the one that one's a little different, I will say. So C++ is in like I did that back in computer science in high school, right? Now I use C# for Unity. C++ feels very similar to C# on the level you would do in like a computer science class. So let's say you're when I did my comp sci in high school, I would like go home and then work on Unity in the evening, and I felt like almost everything I learned was like 1-to-1. That being said, learning to do C++ on the level that I do C# nowadays, like let's say with Unreal Engine, because Unreal Engine uses C++, that is an entirely different story, because there's kind of like I'm not going to get super into it right now because it's very complicated and I don't want to take up like a ton more time, but effectively, C++, your computer has a certain amount of memory, RAM, that kind of stuff, and C# handles all the memory stuff for you. So every time you make a variable, every time you do something, C# knows that if you don't use it for too long, then it can just forget it ever existed, wipe it from the memory, because it has something called the garbage collector. And it's just like when you're programming, you leave a ton of garbage behind you most of the time, and you never think about it. But in the background, almost all of these engines almost all of these programming languages are going and sweeping up all of that garbage. Then they're using a lot of like work from your computer to do that, and it is bad for performance. Now what C++ does is they don't have a garbage collector. You have to, all that garbage you have to collect yourself, or else it's just going to build up and build up and build up forever until your computer crashes. You're confused about why. And that's kind of like that extra level of confusion is like makes it much harder to work with C++ than other languages, from my experience anyway.
Excellent. All right, I think we're going to wrap it up now, Jeffrey. So we really thank you very much for joining us. I think the campers really like that. Can we get a round of applause for Jeffrey? Thanks a lot, everybody. And so from Stockholm, Sweden, this has been Jeffrey Tomac joining our live stream. Thanks so much, buddy.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on. I'd be happy to do something like this again sometime.
Sounds good.
But yeah, and if any of you guys independently have some questions about game dev, feel free to reach out to me over Discord. I have a lot going on, so I can't promise I'll get back immediately, but I'll try to.
That's good. All right, thanks, buddy. We'll see you around.